to Television Ideas. Television Ideas is a program that explores ideas and concepts in the following areas: psychology, parapsychology, the supernatural, psychology, parapsychology, consciousness, ESP, dreams, spirituality, healing, creativity, quantum physics, business wealth, and the Word of God. As you know, I always attempt to cover one of those areas. It could be something that you may not identify as creativity, but you know, creativity could be anything: singing, dancing, playing an instrument, painting, reciting poetry, writing. Computer savvy people are very creative. And so today's topic will be on abuse and bullying. Now, abuse and bullying has many different faces because there are different kinds of abuse and bullying, and also degrees of that kind of behavior. So you wonder, well, what's going on in this relationship? A relationship when one is the abuser and the other one is the abused or the abusee. And so we want to discover that relationship, that conversation that's taken place, that interaction between usually two individuals, but it could involve groups of people as well. Now, where does bullying and abuse take place? It can take place in the home, it can take place in the school, it can take place in a professional office, a doctor's office. It could take place in society at large, the environment, the culture, your community. It could take place in government, in the Senate, in Congress, in politics. So the workplace, it can take place in church. It could take place in an educational system. And so we see the individual, the abuser, and we attempt to identify their behavior. You know, what is it about this particular behavior? They have a particular leaning, tendency, proclivity to go in that direction. They have a tremendous need to be in power and to be in control over, have dominance over someone else. They go into a pattern, a set, where they are the dominant figure, and then the other one becomes, I guess, you know, subdominant or slave-like mentality, inhibited. Now, when this takes place, you attempt to identify as quickly as possible, because the abuser begins early on to groom the other person. When I say groom, they begin with something very subtle, very innocent to the eye, unless you're somewhat trained. So you want to be able to identify, is it the individual, is it inherent, is it their nature, or is it nurture, is it learned behavior? And if it is learned behavior, where did they learn it? Did they learn it at home? Did they see it in school? Are they modeling? Are they imitating something? Maybe they see it on TV or movies, and they copy that behavior. Something about that attracts them, because they have a tremendous need to be the controlling one, the dominant one. And so they're very astute. They always are able to identify their target, their prey. They're very savvy that way. Also, when talking about the traits of these individuals, so we begin to see a pattern. Basically, even though they take this authoritarian, powerful, dominant, bullying stance, deep down they're very fearful, and they're very insecure, apprehensive. What happens is they're so afraid they begin to intimidate someone else. They exhibit behavior that if you pay attention, you will notice it. So they oppress, they aggress against the other. Of course, they intimidate, they discriminate, they're very prejudiced. They harass the other. They're very deceptive. They lie, and they're able to cover their tracks whenever they say or do something. So they're good at covering their tracks. That's why many people that are um, outside the law are not easy to catch, because they're aware they're doing something wrong. They're aware, but they have a tendency to take temper tantrums or to become very volatile. And then that's when they become very dangerous, to the point that they can actually kill someone. But they're also dream killers, because abusing a child or an adult, they begin removing rewards, killing their hopes, their faith, their dreams, their goals. So they're about destroying, they're about destruction. So they have a tendency to lie, to steal, and to cheat. This is very dominant in them. And so when they lie, then they have to commit another lie to cover up for the first one. Or if they did something terribly wrong, if they suspect that someone saw them, they become very vengeful and very vindictive, and they go after that person that they think they have perceived that they have been seen committing this atrocious crime. They're evil. Most of these people, deep down, they're evil. They don't feel empathy. They don't feel mercy or compassion. They lack that in their feeling. They have a tendency to demean, to cut the other up, to criticize. They accuse unfairly. They're somewhat paranoid. Not necessarily that they're psychotics, even though some psychotics are aggressive and bullies and abusers, but they could also be neurotics that have this tendency, this leaning, this proclivity, this behavior. They derive pleasure out of doing this, whereas someone that's not an abuser won't go in that direction, because they just can't, because they feel compassion for the other. So they also do a lot of manipulation and coercion. They condemn, they judge, they do a lot of projection. It's always the other person's fault. It's never they lack self-reflection. They can't see themselves. They take everything that's negative in them, and then they project it onto someone else, and then of course that someone else needs to be punished, because this is what they see. They have projected all that negativity that's really within the abuser. They've projected it, put it on someone else, an innocent bystander, so to speak. And so so then they perceive, it's a perception. The perception is off, it's twisted, it's incorrect. It's not based in reality. They have a slightly different reality. Some of them a bigger distortion of reality. So of course they're very aggressive. They're really angry. They're fuming. They can't seem to contain their anger. They don't know how to express anger in constructive ways, so they become destructive. So they also tend to isolate their victim, and you don't know this. You don't know this until someone brings it to your attention. But they have traits, and if you can pick the traits, then you begin looking for the other traits. It's a series of them, multitude of them. So they're very unjust, they're very unfair, unfair treatment, they're very menacing. They threaten, even with a glance, they threaten you. Their tone of voice, they may yell, they may be sarcastic, they may take temper tantrums, they may throw, break things. So they'll put barriers and obstacles in front of the person they want to injure and hurt. They attempt to limit that other person by placing restrictions. It's like they think they're the law, and they set down certain rules, and you must obey those rules. if you happen to be living with an abuser, a bullier, the towel has to be placed in such a way, or they're time conscious, not necessarily a bad thing, but this has to be done at such a very authoritarian, very dictatorial. So they have difficulty with the truth. Their explanation of an incident is totally different from the other witnesses. They seem to distort even in what they see. So it's a distortion of perception within them. Some of them may even give in to cursing and being vulgar. So you want to keep in mind, simply because you want to be able to identify them. And you wonder, so what is the root cause? So in psychology, it is said that the children that have been abused become abusers, unless, of course, they get therapy and people care enough to teach them, instruct them, and show them in a kind way their misbehavior and call them. However, some people that misbehave as children, they're mischievous. They do little things like if you have a little pet, they may even kill your little pet. Or if you have, say, a dog or a cat, they'll mistreat the dog or the cat. So you begin to wonder, what is the root cause? What's going on with these people, that they have this aggression? It's really aggression. It's anger, and they don't know. They become explosive. They have meltdowns. They take temper tantrums. And even though they're adults, they can take a temper tantrum. And then, reasonable people, intelligent people, peaceful people, they'll shy away and they'll just let them have their way. And it's wrong. They have to be called. They have to be shown that what they're doing is wrong, what they're saying is wrong. Because if you don't stop them, they get more inflated with their ego and their desire to be more destructive. So, like I said, this takes place, it usually begins in the home, but it can also be learned behavior in school or elsewhere. It usually begins in the home. And so I know that teachers have to take a course in child abuse, and of course, if you're studying psychology, you must take some of those child development courses. And so it seems that more of that should be done. So they're into not being fair. So you see a lot of inequality, a lot of imbalance in relationships. And you can see this in relationships. You can see this in friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, married couples, and by the way, these individuals also seek power positions, because they like power. They want to be the powerful. They want to be the dictator. So that they can feel free to take the reign and bully those underneath them. So if you know anyone like that, they need to be called out. They need to be pointed. They'll deny it, by the way. They never admit they're wrong. They're never wrong. It's always the other person's fault. So it's very, very difficult. But when you catch them early on at a younger, tender age, you can say, well, look here, Johnny, that was not nice. How do you think the other person feels? You can, dialogue with them and attempt to show them right from wrong and vice versa. So I've always questioned, is it nature? Is it within that person? Is that person damaged goods? Is it inherent within them that they're evil, that they're just mean and vicious and cruel? Is it that, or is it nurture? Is it learned? How much of it was learned? Because they saw, let's say a child sees, let's suppose, and it could happen the other way around. Let's say a child sees the father abusing the mother. So they see that behavior and they don't like it. But then when they grow up, a part of them identifies with the dad because he was the powerful. He could go and come and break and do whatever. And the wife just took it. So then the child becomes like the dad. So whereas other children that may have seen such abusive situation may make a decision not to do that. And so they have to be somewhat conscious and take that conscious decision not to, like you could have an alcoholic, right? So you have an alcoholic parent. So the child may say, well, I saw that in my father or mother or my uncle, whoever, and I didn't like that, and I don't want to do that. I don't like that in me. And they may make the decision not to drink. And you have people that just will not drink or for that matter, take drugs. Okay, so you wonder, oh, they don't smoke and they don't drink, they don't do drugs, and yet they can be the worst bully and abusers because all that got repressed. They're not doing that because, you know, for them to drink, people would see. For them to smoke, people would see. And they don't want to be condemned by those around that see them. Also, they don't touch the smoke or the drug. However, they are the biggest bullies, abusers that the planet could have. They can become dictators. They can become nepotists. They can be mean and cruel. So again, is it the individual that's damaged, that's weak, and or is it society? That society has lost its morals. What is it? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. So all these injustices and unfairness, inequalities have happened throughout time and in different parts of the world. Like, you know, in different parts of the world, so women have no right or very little rights. And even in our own country, I mean, women were not allowed to vote. Black people were not allowed to vote or to own property. So or to save money. So you wonder, how come the society allowed that? In a way, we all have to take responsibility. How come that was tolerated? How come that went on for so long? So if I don't want to, because I was going to have a guest today, and so I narrowed it down to the workplace. But in this particular program, I'm speaking in general terms. So it can happen in the workplace. It could happen to a man just as well as a woman. It can happen to boys just as much as girls. And so you wonder, what is this all about? This need to dominate, to have that dominance, to be one up on the other, to stomp the other. What is it? What has gone wrong with the emotions, their thinking patterns? Something drastically has gone wrong. So you wonder when you see this, and I have seen it, and I don't like it. And years back when I was younger, I didn't dare speak up. But now I'm a little bolder, a little older, perhaps a little wiser, and I have said to someone, well, why are you mean to that person? That person is only trying to help you. So I have said that. I said, why are you being aggressive? That behavior is aggressive. And on that tone, aggression, once I worked for the Department of Human Resources, and I was interviewing a man, and the man was upset and he was yelling. So I called him on it very nicely. I said, you know, you're very abusive. And he was startled. He said, how am I abusive? I said, well, you're yelling at me. You're yelling at me, and I'm attempting to help you. I'm here to help you, to service you. And then he realized, he recognized, and his tone came down, and I caught that. I said, wow, I wonder if anyone ever told him that we can be aggressive with our tongue and the words and the tone. And yeah, the tongue is a two-edged sword. So, you can either use your voice and your words to give life or to take life, break dreams. So, I remember that very clearly. It just came up that I remember that. Nonetheless, I do. Um, you grow in awareness. You become somewhat alert to certain things that you have read or experienced. And so the idea is, if you see something wrong, call it out. Call it out. Like, right now in the news, so we have this Me Too movement. And so some people doubt what these women have gone through. No, they have been encouraged by the other. They have been emboldened. They have been empowered because they see their sisters opening up. And even though it's embarrassing many times and shameful what has happened to them, but they were innocent in that situation. Like I said, the abuser and the bully, they're very astute. They don't like to be seen by the masses. So they're very sneaky, very underhanded, very secretive, and they accomplish whatever it is they're accomplishing hidden. And they don't particularly like to be seen or to be called out. And anyway, they're going to deny it. They'll deny it and deny it and deny it till they die. So they have that core. It's a core that is very difficult to penetrate. So we have these master-slave mentality, sadomasochist, sadistic, twisted human beings. I use the word human beings because, according to science, they're humans, right? But they really behave like animals. They really do. And so they function, these animals, they function, like I said before, very devious. So they'll take away rewards, accolades, any kind of benefit that the other may have. They rob you of peace of mind. They create chaos. They just want to be in power. They think they're above the law. They think they're the next best thing that happened next to God. So you wonder, how did all this get started? In the studies that I have read and my own personal thinking, it starts early on. Something triggered that behavior. Either trauma, something they saw, something that happened to them, and so they perhaps they see that to be the dominant one is better, that they're better off, that they can put others down and step on others for them to accomplish their task. So they're basically cowards. That's what they are. They're cowards. They're insecure. They're so afraid. They're terrified. But you would never know it because you don't see their fear. What you see is their anger and their abuse and their aggression. So you wonder, and you also wonder, men tend to be more abusive than women, even though there are women that are abusive. And you wonder about the hormone testosterone. So does that have anything to do with it? And if you watch some of these TV programs about nature, so you always see it's the male. The male will fight to the death to get the female, and even devour the little cubs, the little lions, so that he could have the female all to himself. So you see that in nature, and I'm wondering, these abusers and bullies, they're very much like animals. They're imitating animals, but we are labeled animals according to science, but we're human beings. So this fearful paranoia, aggression, the they're so uncomfortable, they're so unhappy, they're so bitter, and they take it out on another human being. And so that so Joey is putting images up. He should put up images of what I'm talking about and not something. Okay, that's okay.
So you prefer this? Wait, one more.
What, there's one more? I can't make that one out. Who's that? Okay, so he's putting on images. So they're very tyrannical. Oh, I'm wondering, very tyrannical, infringing on the other's rights. Oh, by the way, they strip the other person of their human rights. Never mind just rights, human rights. If they have it up to them, they would have certain groups not have the right to vote or have a voice. They can also exhibit psychotic episodes. They have meltdowns. They become incoherent when they're in their crazy mode. So, excuse me. So you have all these traits and characteristics, and deep down they're insecure, but they're not going to show you their weakness. They won't. They won't admit it ever. So they present the complete opposite: power and aggression. But you know what? They have no authority, but they behave authoritarian. They have no real power, but they appear powerful because that's the way they want to be perceived. So this explosive, power controlling, they're very hungry for that. And they do seek positions of power. And so it's interesting. But not everyone that seeks positions of power or are in a powerful position, abusive and bullying and vindictive. No. But the ones that have those traits, they want to be. And they will stomp on anyone that they perceive to be in their way. They, like I said, no mercy, no compassion, no empathy. And so no pity, nope, nothing. They don't have that. They're very insensitive to other people's needs, extremely insensitive. They're oblivious to the other person's experience of pain and suffering and sorrow.